Hello and welcome. Today we have the webinar with the title of TISAX is not a certification, but a trust mechanism. During the next hour, we will be handling this topic, but while starting, I want to give you some information about CFE certification and CFE Academy. CFE certification is an independent auditing company and a member of UK's IAS and TÜRKAK. CFE CERT is a member of the British Education Accreditation Authority CPD certification service, and as a certification body, it's audits and certificates many management systems with a very large span from quality to information security to private information to business continuity, environment, and so on. Also by the academy, CFE also provides many training services. Again, they span a very large area, sector-specific training, topic-specific trainings, and many of them are provided in multiple languages. And CFE has many branches and centers throughout the world, as you can see on the map. It also provides first, second, and third degree, third-party certification. Also, CFCERT is a member of the UK Cyber Security Council and Corporate Risk Management Association. For more information, you can check the website as well. And my name is Cenk Tezel. I'm from Turkey. I have a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering and a master's degree in informatics. I have been working on the subject of information security for almost 20 years. I worked as a consultant, manager, trainer, auditor, and I audit many different types of information security, business continuity frameworks. And today I will be talking about the very crown jewel of the information security frameworks, the TISAX. TISAX is Trusted Information Security Assessment Exchange, and if you want to learn how's and what's about TISAX, you can check the TISAX Participant Handbook, which is published by ENX Corp organization and which can be downloaded from enx.com. And it's a pretty good book. But we will, for the next hour, or let's say 40 minutes, be looking at the TISAX framework from a little bit different angle. On the 31st of August 2025, something went wrong inside the systems of a company connected to Jaguar Land Rover. We don't know exactly where it started, and that's the point. What we do know is what happened next. Production lines went quiet. Workers were told to stay home. And for 3 weeks, not 3 hours, not 3 days, one of Britain's most iconic manufacturers did not build a single car. By the time it was over, the estimated damage to the British economy stood at £1.9 billion. More than 104,000 supply chain jobs had been put at risk. Smaller suppliers, the Tier 2s and Tier 3s, began laying people off. The UK government stepped in with a $1.6 billion equivalent loan facility to keep payments flowing. The attack did not start at Jaguar Land Rover. It traveled to Jaguar Land Rover. want you to hold that image till the end of this webinar, please. Not as a cautionary tale about someone else's misfortune, but as a precise illustration of what the automotive supply chain actually is and what it demands from every company operating within. OEMs do not just give you a purchase order, they give you access to vehicle development data, the pricing strategies, the production timelines that represent billions in investment and years of competitive position. They share this information because they have to. Because building a car in the modern world means trusting dozens, sometimes hundreds of suppliers with information that would be devastating in wrong hands. And in return, they need to know that their information is safe with you. Not that you passed the test, that their information is safe. That is what TISAX is. Not a certification you obtain and file away. Not a label you display to satisfy procurement. It is the automotive industry's answer to a question that every OEM is asking about every supplier every day. Can we trust you with that, what we have given you? Now we are going to look at what it actually means to answer yes to that question and mean it. Let's start why this mechanism, why was built in the first place. Think about what it means to be a major OEM today. You share sensitive information, sometimes your most commercially sensitive information, with hundreds of suppliers. Vehicle designs, component specifications, launch timelines, pricing structures, information that competitors would pay significant sums to obtain. You cannot audit every one of those suppliers personally. You do not have the resources, and even if you did, the supply chain moves too fast. What you need is a system that lets trust flow through the chain at a scale, a way of knowing, without physically verifying, that the partner you just shared a confidential prototype specification with has the controls in place to protect it. That is what the ENX Association built when it created TISAX. The assessment exchange model means that the supplier is evaluated once by an accredited auditor, and the result is shared directly with the OEM partners, who need to see it, not published publicly, shared. The results flow only to the parties who need it within a trusted network. In 2021, Volkswagen and Audi discovered that what happens when that trust breaks down. A vendor they relied on had left the customer data, which is data for a full 5 years, unprotected and unexposed for nearly 2 years. More than 3.3 million customers and prospective buyers were affected. Over 90,000 had their sensitive financial information exposed. The breach did not originate inside Volkswagen. It originated inside the vendor's systems, but it was Volkswagen's name in the headlines. This is the dynamic TISAX was designed to prevent. The OEM carries the reputational and regulatory exposure for decisions made inside the supplier's environment. A TISAX assessment at the right label gives the OEM evidence, documented, audited evidence, that their information is being handled appropriately. Without it, they are extending trust on a face alone. Notice also that what TISAX does not do. It does not publish your result in a public registry for anyone to find, at least lately. It does not return your security posture into a marketing credential. When you share a TISAX result with an OEM, you are making a specific commitment to a specific partner. That is a bilateral act of trust, and it is architecturally different from a certification that exists to signal competence to in the general market. ISO 27001 tells the world you have an information security management system. TISAX tells a specific partner that their information is safe in your hands. They are asking different questions. Knowing why it was built this way changes what you're actually being asked to protect. Let's be specific about that. When you receive a data package from an OEM, a CAD file, a component specification, a pricing brief, the information doesn't belong to you. You have the custody of it. And with custody comes obligation. Categories of information that flow through the automotive supply chains are not generic business data. Vehicle development data represents years of engineering investment and billions in R&D spent. Competitive roadmaps containing launch timing that would be extraordinarily valuable for a competitor. Pricing structures are commercially sensitive in ways that can affect entire negotiation positions. Customer data carries regulatory obligations that fall on the OEM the moment it is mishandled. Wherever the supply chain that mishandling occurs, it doesn't matter. It's the OEM. TISAX's assessment criteria are built around this reality. The labels with differing assessment levels, AL1, AL2, AL3, reflect the sensitivity of the information you are handling and the controls required to protect it at that level. This is not a bureaucratic grading. It is a calibration. The higher the label, the higher the stakes of what you have been trusted with. In August 2023, Toyota's production across 14 plants in Japan came to a complete stop for 36 hours. No attack, no ransomware, no external threat actor. During a written database maintenance, data was deleted and reorganized. An error occurred due to insufficient disk space. The system stopped. And because the backup function was running on the same infrastructure, the backup failed too. The cost of that 36-hour halt across 14 plants for the world's largest automaker was significant by any measure. Plant 23,000 cars were not built, and the cause was not a sophisticated adversary. It was a failure in operational discipline, capacity planning, separation of production and backup environments, basic availability controls. TISAX's requirements around availability, business continuity, and system resilience exist because this kind of failure is not hypothetical. Keeping OEM information safe is not only preventing unauthorized access. It is about ensuring that the systems protecting that information and the production processes depending on it keep running. If your systems go down, the parts orders stop. The production line that depends on your just-in-time delivery doesn't get its confirmation. And the question that follows from your OEM customer is not just, when will you be back online? It is, were you ever as secure as your TISAX label implied? Your security posture is not a private matter. It is a load-bearing element of someone else's production system. So if that is what is at stake, why do so many organizations still treat TISAX as a checkbox? Let's look at where the compliance mindset breaks down. When we look at the labels, what we see? At first glance, these labels may look like a simple classification system, but in reality, they represent a very specific protection requirement directly tied to risk, business impact, and most importantly, trust within the automotive ecosystem. We start with the top two, info high and info very high. These labels are not just about confidentiality. They reflect the overall protection need, including confidentiality, integrity, and availability, the CIA triangle. In practice, info high typically applies to sensitive but controlled information. For example, supplier contracts, technical drawings, or internal process documentation. InfoWare High is a different game. Here we are talking about the critical intellectual property, pre-release designs or strategic data, if exposed, could cause severe competitive or financial damage. The difference is not incremental, it's exponential in terms of risk exposure and required controls. Now, numbers 3 and 4, confidential and strictly confidential. These labels zoom in specifically on access control and data exposure risk. Confidential means access must be restricted, but within defined organizational boundaries. Strictly confidential implies very tight access control, often including need-to-know enforcement, strong identity and access management, monitoring and traceability. In real-world TISAX audits, this is where many organizations struggle, not because they lack tools, but because they lack consistent enforcement of access principles. Most times, it is expressed as, we defined roles, but access rights grew organically over the time. And this is where the TISAX expects maturity, frequent controls, monitoring, and updating. When we look at availability-oriented labels, if you are a parts supplier, you most of the time fall in this category. High availability and very high availability. These labels are especially critical for production systems, ERP MES environments, supply chain coordination platforms. Here the question is, what happens if this system is down? When high availability, it means downtime is problematic but manageable. Very high availability means downtime is unacceptable. It directly impacts operations, revenue, or even safety. And this aligns perfectly with RTO, RPO definitions, disaster recovery strategies, redundancy architectures. And in fact, TISAX in this area overlaps strongly with business continuity management systems, even if it doesn't explicitly reference it. Now we move into a completely different category, the pink section in the table. Proto parts, proto vehicles, test vehicles, proto events. This is where TISAX becomes uniquely automotive. These labels are not just about information. They are about physical and visual exposure risk. For example, a prototype vehicle seen in public, which means immediate confidentiality breach. A component photographed during testing, which means a potential intellectual property leakage. That's why controls here include physical security, transport security, and event management controls, photo video restrictions, restricted areas, camouflage, storage. And if you are only stuck with ISO 27001, you are caught off guard because it is mostly about the security of the information. But TISAX says, What about the parking lot? What about the test track? What about the supplier workshop? And you have to think all about it. Now, finally, the blue section. We have data and special data. These are directly aligned with the GDPR requirements. When we say data, it's about the personal data under Article 28 of GDPR. And we talk about special data, it is the sensitive personal data under Article 9. This is where TISAX intersects with ISO 27701 or privacy governance frameworks. But there is a nuance here. TISAX does not replace GDPR. It expects alignment with it. So if your data protection processes are weak, your TISAX maturity will also be questioned. Now let's step back. These labels are not just audit categories. They define scope of assessment, depth of controls, evidence expectations, and audit complexity. And most importantly, they determine how your organization is perceived by OEMs or Tier 1 customers. Choosing a label is effectively saying, this is the level of trust you can place in us, whether you choose or your customer. One of the most common mistakes I see is this. Organizations either underestimate their required label, leading to compliance gaps later, or overestimate it, creating unnecessary operational burden. The right approach is risk-based, process-aware, aligned with actual business exposure. And the sure way is asking your customer which labels they want to see, and then work for it. And if we summarize in one sentence, TISAX labels are not just classifications, they are commitments. Commitments to protect information, safeguard prototypes, ensure availability, respect personal data, and ultimately to operate as a trusted partner in the automotive ecosystem. Now, I want to be direct here about the compliance mindset and the pitfalls, because this is where the most significant gap tends to exist between what TISAX is designed to achieve and what actually happens in practice. The first failure mode is scoping to pass rather than scoping to protect. TISAX assessments cover a defined scope, the systems, locations, and processes relevant to the information you handle. The temptation, particularly for organizations treating the assessment as a project with a deadline, is to define the scope as narrowly as possible. Keep the assessment manageable. Minimize the remediation required. Get the label. The problem is that the OEM partner sharing their data does not confine that data to your TISAX scope. The information flows across your organization as your work requires. A narrow scope that reflects your compliance posture rather than your actual information handling creates a false picture, and the OEM is trusting a picture that doesn't represent reality. The second failure mode is treating the assessment as a project with an end date. TISAX results expire. They must be reassessed. The cycle is not a bureaucratic inconvenience. It is the mechanism that ensures the trust relationship reflects the current state of your organization, not the state it was in 3 years ago. And also must reflect what your organization may be in the next 3 years. When organizations treat reassessment as an unwelcome interruption rather than an ongoing obligation, the result is a scramble to rebuild what lapsed rather than a program that never stopped. The third failure mode is the one that perhaps most directly undermines the purpose of the mechanism. Filing the result away rather than actively using it. A TISAX result that sits in a procurement folder is not functioning as a trust mechanism. It is functioning as a receipt. The mechanism only works when results are actively shared with the partners who need to see them and when both parties treat that sharing as the beginning of a conversation, not the end of one. And here is the uncomfortable reality that follows from all three failure modes. An OEM partner who receives your shared result is not just looking at your label. Sophisticated OEM procurement under supplier risk teams understands these patterns, a scope that seems curiously narrow. Area assessment that came through at the last possible moment. A label level that doesn't seem to match the sensitivity of the work that you are doing together. These are signals. They communicate something about the seriousness with which you take the obligation. A label earned through minimum effort signals that you approach the question, can we trust you, as an administrative burden rather than a professional commitment. That is a reputational cost that accumulates quietly in supplier risk assessments and procurement conversations you may never be party to. So what does the right approach looks like? What does it mean to make the most of your improvement while genuinely serving the purpose of TISAX? Everything we have discussed so far has been about the OEM's perspective. Why TISAX exists, what they need from you, what goes wrong when organizations treat it as an exercise in minimum compliance. Now I want to turn to what happens when an organization gets this right. When you approach TISAX as a genuine commitment to protecting the information entrusted to you, when you scope honestly, build continuous programs rather than periodic projects, and actively engage with the results rather than filing them away, the improvement that follows is not a burden. It is a byproduct of doing the job properly. And that improvement delivers concrete value to your organization, not as a motivation to pursue it, as a consequence of pursuing it for the right reasons. Organizations with mature information security programs spend less time on ad hoc OEM audits. When your TISAX result reflects a genuine and current security posture, the questions that would otherwise be asked separately in due diligence reviews, in supplier qualification processes, in incident response exercises are already answered. The trust is already established. The relationship moves faster because the foundation is solid. A well-maintained TISAX program also changes your position in new business conversations. When an OEM is evaluating suppliers for a new program, the suppliers who can demonstrate a current appropriate scope assessment at the right label level are not starting from the same positions as those who cannot. Trust is a commercial advantage in supply chain that depends on it. Internally, the controls required to meet the TISAX requirements, access management, incident response, availability planning, supplier oversight, are not TISAX specific. They are the fundamentals of a resilient operation. The organization that has built these capabilities to protect OEM information has also built them to protect its own. When something goes wrong, and eventually something will, the organization with mature controls recover faster, contains the damage more effectively, and maintains the continuity of its customer relationships. Finally, a word on the assessment levels. The difference between AL2 and AL3 is not simply a more demanding assessment. It is a signal about the sensitivity of the information your OEM partner is willing to share with you, and about the risk appetite they have calibrated for your relationship. When you operate at AL3 level labels, you are being trusted with information that requires a higher threshold of protection. That is a statement about the depth of the relationship, not just the rigor of the audit. Embedding TISAX into your supplier and vendor lifecycle, rather than running it as a periodic standalone exercise, is what transforms it from a compliance event into an operating principle. Your suppliers carry your information too. The chain extends in both directions. Well, in Turkish, there's a saying. In Turkish, it is, bugün Allah için ne yaptın? Which means, what did you do for God today? Maybe it's in some form exists in every religion, but this is how we say in Turkish. Now let's bring this word slightly dangerously or slightly humorously. What did you do for Volkswagen, Renault, Fiat, Mercedes, or whichever is your OEM today? Yes, pun absolutely intended. At first, it sounds funny. But if you think about it, this question actually captures the spirit of TISAX surprisingly well. Because TISAX is not about just passing an audit, collecting a label, or uploading documents to a portal. It's about daily behavior. Let's translate this question into real-life examples. Did you review access rights? Or did someone still have the access to data they shouldn't? Maybe they left 6 months ago. Did you challenge a process that felt insecure? Or did you say, it's always been like this? Did you ensure that prototype was handled properly? Or did just someone take a quick photo? And here's the key point. Your OEM doesn't see your policies. Your OEM doesn't see your procedures. Your OEM experiences the results of your discipline. All the controls are designed to protect the OEM, not you. Simple as that. So when we ask, what did you do for your OEM today? What we really mean is, did you reduce risk? Did you protect trust? Did you behave like a reliable partner in the supply chain? Because in the end, TISAX is not about compliance. It's about this very simple idea. Every day, in small actions, you either strengthen trust or weaken it. So maybe we don't put this question into the official procedures. But honestly, it wouldn't be a bad daily checklist. What did I do today that would make my OEM trust me more? And if the answer is clear, you are already doing TISAX right. We talked about it in rounder terms, but while serving your OEM through TISAX requirements, you can build something for you as well. Let's ask this. How can we use TISAX to make our organization stronger, faster, and more resilient? Hands-on. Because if TISAX is treated only as label exercise, you get compliance. If it is treated as a management framework, you get capability. Let's walk through a few key areas, very practically. Project management. TISAX pushes us to structure projects with defined intensity, controlled information flows, secure collaboration. Internally, this translates to project classification, predefined security rules, inclusive risk management, especially in automotive projects where requirements evolve. This becomes a risk control mechanism, not just government overhead. Or external IT services. Many organizations assume we use a cloud provider. They are secure. TISAX challenges the assumption. It forces clear contracts, defined responsibilities, security expectations for third parties. Internally, this reduces blind spots, overdependence, legal and operational risk. This aligns very well with your TISAX supplier categorization approach, especially for critical data accessing vendors. Tailored training. General awareness training is easy. TISAX expects more. Role-based training, context-specific scenarios, targeted competence for critical personnel. Internally, this creates faster decision-making, fewer human errors, stronger accountability, and especially for roles like system admins, project managers, prototype handlers, risk owners, and also business continuity roles. Training becomes operational capability, not just compliance evidence. Identity and access management is where theory meets reality. TISAX expectations push you forward. Least privilege, periodic access reviews, and very frequent periodic access reviews, strong authentication, role clarity. Internally, this gives you control over data exposure, faster onboarding, offboarding, reduced insider risks, and for both internal and external access, logically and physically. Cryptographic security. Encryption is often seen as a technical topic. TISAX reframes it as protection of business value. When done right, it ensures secure data transfer with customers, protection of stored sensitive data, trust in digital collaboration. Internally, this reduces data leakage risk and compliance exposure. Incident management and business continuity. This is where everything comes together. TISAX requires defined incident response, escalation mechanisms, recovery capabilities, and internally, this means you don't improvise under pressure. You recover faster, you maintain service even during disruption. This aligns perfectly with your approach. Phase recovery, service prioritization, ERP, MES, DNS, email, whatever. Manual fallback strategies. This is not just compliance, this is survivability. Network and service security. TISAX forces organizations to understand their network, segment critical assets, control communication paths. Internally, this leads to better monitoring, reduced attack surface, clearer architecture, especially in environments with multiple sites, segmented networks, and secure file transfer. This becomes a major strength. Then comes the change management. Many incidents are not attacks. They are bad changes. TISAX enforces controlled change process, testing and approval, documentation. Internally, this ensures stability, accountability, reduced operational surprises. And the key point, it is not only for software or hardware changes. Change of process, change of material or parts, change of suppliers, and the list goes on. Also, critical suppliers. This is one of the most strategic areas. TISAX requires you to identify critical suppliers, evaluate their security posture, manage risk proactively. Internally, this gives you end-to-end visibility, fewer supply chain surprises, stronger negotiation power. Your categorization model fits perfectly here. IT service providers, data processors, system access suppliers, or the suppliers you share the sensitive data, like drawings of the next year's model to build a mold for a prototype part. This is exactly how TISAX expects you to think. If we summarize all this, TISAX is a structured way of forcing good management practices, not new practices, disciplined execution of what we already know is right. So instead of asking, how do we comply with TISAX? A better question is, how do we use TISAX to run our organization better than our competitors? Because when implemented properly, security improves, operations stabilize, trust increases, and in the automotive ecosystem, trust is not a soft value. It is a competitive advantage. So let me bring us back to where we started, because I think you will hear it differently now. We opened with a date, a moment when something went wrong inside a connected system and production stopped across one of Britain's most significant manufacturers for 3 weeks. £1.9 billion, 104,000 jobs at risk. Government intervention to keep payments flowing to suppliers. I said at the start that we did not know exactly where it began. That is still true. What is different now is that you understand what TISAX is built to address and what the absence of genuine security commitment means for the whole system. The question is no longer abstract. The next time you are in a conversation about your TISAX scope, your reassessment timeline, your information handling practices, the question underneath all those conversations is this: could your posture have been the entry point? Not theoretically, specifically. The automotive supply chain is not a collection of independent businesses that occasionally exchange components. It is a living system in which every node depends on the reliability and integrity of every other node. When one node fails, when information leaks, when systems go down, when the integrity of the data cannot be confirmed, the failure propagates, the harm travels. TISAX is the mechanism that industry built to make the system more trustworthy. It only works if the organizations within it treat it as what it is. Not a certification to obtain, but a commitment to honor. Continuously, honestly, at the level the information you have been given actually requires. Be the supplier that OEMs trust without hesitation, not because you passed the test, but because you genuinely protect what was given to you. TISAX does not ask whether you are compliant. It asks whether you are trustworthy. And believe me, those are not the same question. Thank you. If there are any questions, I will be happy to answer within the boundaries of a certification body. Well, if there are no questions, I thank you for your patience. I hope it was instructive, informative. And there is a link in the chat box where you can receive your participation certificates from. Please don't forget to get them. And thank you again. Good evening.